I'm Stephen. I was a PhD student in the Department of Chemistry from 2000 till 2003. I spent actually the last year of my PhD at Imperial College London because my advisor moved from Sheffield, although I still graduated from Sheffield, so it says Sheffield on certificates. That's the thing that I'm proud of. Um, I did a PhD in organic chemistry. I then went to continue my research career with a postdoc position, and then from there I've moved into editorial, and I now work for a journal called Nature Reviews Chemistry. So my job title right now is chief editor um, for the journal Nature Reviews Chemistry. That's part of a bigger company that's Springer Nature. The magazines are part of Nature, the Nature Research brand. So Nature Chemistry, Nature Chemical Biology, several of the journals that we publish. And I work for a new journal that launched this year, 2017, Nature Reviews Chemistry. So I started my editorial career about 12 years ago now, coming up for 12 years ago, working for the Royal Society of Chemistry. I moved from a traditional kind of research career, postdoc position, directly to an editorial job for the Royal Society of Chemistry. I worked for them for a couple of years, and then I moved to Nature in 2008 to work on the launch of Nature Chemistry. I moved to Boston to work for them, and I was in Boston for about 7 years, and then I moved back to London to launch this new journal, Nature Reviews Chemistry. I think it was mostly a desire to for broader interests. I'm not as a PhD student or as a postdoc researcher. You're very focused on a very niche bit of research, and I I guess I don't concentrate on things a lot. I like to think about lots of different things, and so when a friend of mine suggested that maybe an editorial career might be something I could consider, that really sparked my interest and led me to apply for a job with the Royal Society of Chemistry. And 12 years later, I'm still doing it, so it's turning out good so far. I've got to say, not many, honestly. I didn't plan to be an editor, but I think I found the right job for me. I When I came to Sheffield originally as an undergraduate, I had a plan that I was going to go and do forensic science. I I studied chemistry because I had some good advice that chemistry was that forensic science was basically chemistry anyway, and that if I did chemistry, I would be able to change my mind. So that turns out to be good advice because I have changed my mind. As I went along, I developed more of an interest in organic chemistry. Um, I did a sandwich degree course, so I did a placement in industry during that degree course, which confirmed my enjoyment of organic chemistry. I worked for SmithKline Beecham. Then when I did my PhD, that was sponsored by GlaxoSmithKline, and then I really didn't know exactly what I was going to do at the end of my PhD, but an opportunity came up to do a postdoc position in the Netherlands, and that seemed like a great opportunity to just go and live in another country and do something fun. So I stayed in the Netherlands for 2 years. I think that maybe then helped with the idea that maybe editorial was something I could do. I worked in a very large group, and they would send me a lot of their papers to comment on because I was one of the native English speakers, despite the fact that all the Dutch students can speak excellent English. So that maybe planted a seed, I guess. But I don't think I made any particular plan to be an editor until I started really thinking about it as a job. I applied for an editorial job, and then I got it. So I finished in the lab one Friday night and I started working as an editor on a Monday morning. It's really that lucky, I guess. Yeah, so not much is the answer. I always had an interest in trying to put my research into a bigger picture, and that's very much what the editorial job is about. I don't. I mean, I still have interests in the very specific area of my research, but I don't know about lots of other areas in the same depth as I know about my PhD research, of course. But I do think about a lot of other areas of research and try to imagine how they fit together. Um, Networking wise, yeah, I mean, I worked in a huge group in the Netherlands, and that enabled me to that now gives me a huge network to work with of people that have moved on into other academic careers and industrial careers and so on, and so that's helpful. But it wasn't something that I necessarily planned. I think if there's one thing that you would need to think about, it's how to explain your research to a more general audience. So think about how how you would describe the importance of your research, and not to someone that knows anything about chemistry. I think you can think of it on different levels. You know, try explaining it to a generally science literate person. Imagine explaining it to friends that are doing other other graduate courses. Imagine explaining it to people that are not studying science, and then and at each level you have to think differently about how you put those how you explain what you do and why it's interesting. I think you need to be aware of what people are going to be looking for. You know, if you wanted to move specifically into an editorial career, the things that I look for now when I'm occasionally interviewing candidates for other jobs in where I work, we look for people with broad interests. We look for people who are, you know, um, interested in scientific developments that are going on outside of their specific fields. We look for them to tell us about interesting stories that are not necessarily science based, but important to scientists. So stories that are ongoing stories in the media about funding, things like that, are things that we like our editors to be interested in because they inform the things that we ultimately want to publish. And the other thing I would say is when we interview people, we get them to actually, we try to make them have like a mock or a mock example of doing the job of making editorial decisions. Now it's not perfect. It's a false example because we can't give them all of the resources that we have on the day-to-day basis. But it's not about making the same decisions that we make as editors. It's about giving your opinion and being able to back that opinion up with an argument. So, I mean, a typical day for a journal editor is lots of reading, actually. And, if you work on a journal that's dealing with primary research papers, then you read new manuscripts from people that have submitted them. You try to look at the background to that research. You try to build up a picture of where that work fits in. And then you make a decision on whether you think it's something that you might like to publish, and you seek peer reviewers. So there's a lot of that. That's the core activity, kind of every day. There are many other things that add to that as well. We commission articles, so on my current journal is a review journal, and so the vast majority of the content that we ultimately publish is commissioned. So that is, we look for trends, we read a lot of the literature. These are things that graduate students do anyway, but I think editors probably end up reading more literature and a wider variety of literature than maybe the average graduate student does, because they're much more focused on a particular area. We look for trends in that. We find people that we think are doing interesting things, and we invite them to write things for us. And then, assuming they agree to write something for us, we then go through that same process, peer review for the manuscripts that they submit. We seek out other experts to comment on that work. And then ultimately we edit it and turn it into the actual published product. There are a whole other level of production staff who then work with us to do copy editing and typesetting and artwork and those kind of things that all feed into the final product. The hours are office hours, but there's a lot of freedom. I'd say that you have it's kind of somewhere between an academic academic freedom in terms of what you read and what you commission. We have targets, of course, and there are a lot of deadlines. There's an issue deadline for every month. There may be more than one issue deadline for each month. So we have a deadline for research articles, and then we have a deadline for what we call front half articles, so news articles and those kind of things. And then there's lots of follow up to do and chasing of people to do to find suitable peer reviewers, to get them to submit their reports and those kind of things. Mostly it's office hours. You get opportunities to travel though. So on occasions, 2 or 3 occasions a year at least, you probably go to conferences, try to meet people in the community, and those tend to be longer hours. Just because of the conferences tend to run over weekends, and maybe you work while at a conference. You work from first thing in the morning at breakfast to last thing at night after drinks, and then do it again for a few days in a row. But it's an exciting kind of thing. You get to travel around the world, meet a lot of really interesting people. And if you're lucky enough to work for a journal like Nature or Nature Chemistry, then you find yourself in demand. People want to talk to you because they want to publish their research with your journal. It's that I get to do the thing that I was probably best at in my research career, which was the literature research. I get to read a lot of different things. I get to not concentrate on one topic from one day to the next, and I get a lot of freedom to read lots of different things and meet a bunch of interesting people, and as I said before, travel around the world doing it. It's great.
Okay, thank you. And what are the challenges of the job?
There's a lot of deadlines. You have to keep on top of those deadlines. You have to keep on top of people being unresponsive and having to chase them. You get to swing between being the most popular person in the world when you accept somebody's manuscript for publication, and the worst person in the world when a few days later you reject a manuscript from that same person. So there's sort of swings in what the emotions, I guess. There's a reasonable amount of criticism that's leveled at editors, because they're portrayed as oh, how can you possibly know anything about my topic? You did research, and you were a postdoc for 2 years and now you're an editor. So how can you possibly judge my work? I think it's mostly a misunderstanding of what we do. We're not judging the science. We're judging whether something is, assuming something is technically correct, whether we think it's interesting. Now that's a subjective decision. And it really is as simple as I liked this. I thought this was interesting. And then we ask some experts to tell us whether it's technically good as well. And if it meets both of those things, then we publish it. And if it doesn't, we don't. It depends on the publisher that you work for, but my role requires a PhD degree. That's because I think it requires an understanding of the experimental work to a certain extent. What kinds of things might be required? Why it might not be possible for somebody to do a particular piece of add a particular experiment or not at the request of a referee. An understanding of the literature and how that works, an understanding of where to search and what to read. I don't think there's. I mean, I don't use the specific knowledge from my PhD, the chemistry knowledge that I gained from my PhD, that much, in the sense that there's not that many papers that are directly related to my research. It's all about understanding how they fit together in a bigger picture. Well, there are always more journals launching. That's not necessarily a popular thing with researchers, but there are always more journals launching because there's more and more research being published, and there's usually roles available in editorial for different publishers. I'd say it's a relatively small industry overall. There aren't necessarily a lot of opportunities when you can be lucky. You can walk into an editorial role and be promoted and become chief editor within the space of 5 or 6 years, or you could be in an editorial role and promoted to senior editor and stay in that role because there isn't an open position. I think I see a lot of people move around between publishers because there are more openings, more possibilities that way. I don't think there's also opportunities to move to other parts of the business. So you can move into a more business oriented, a publishing role. The experience as an editor is still useful, although not essential for those roles. But yes, it can be a difficult thing sometimes if you think you don't see opportunities opening up. You can be waiting for somebody above you to leave or move on to see that there's the perfect opening for you. But I've been, I guess I was an editor at one journal for 8 years before moving on, which is not unusual, but I gained a lot of experience and enjoyed that time a lot, and then moved on to launch a new journal. So the opportunities do arise, and the further you go in this job, the less you'd probably be involved with the actual science, I would say. So the further I go, the less I actually get to deal with the specifics of chemistry papers. I try to develop an interest in lots of other areas of science and try to see how they fit together. Practice explaining why you like something versus something else, and develop outside of your own research. Practice the writing skills and the same thing, but again, but as in written form. Those are the things that we look for, and attention to detail in terms of those when you're writing those things. We get people apply for editorial jobs and they don't use a spell checker when they write an application letter, which doesn't usually go down very well. Everyone makes errors, but I think if you're applying for an editorial job, it's probably worth checking it 3 or 4 times.